the saying, water seeks its own level. But water does a lot more than that. It also has a strong tendency to reflect whatever's behind it. If we put a bright red on a door, say back in here, then that same red drops down into the water. And the water not only accurately reflects that color, but it reflects how light or how dark that color is. That color is value. There's a special relationship between value and color. As a matter of fact, value is one of color's main properties. As I sat along this bank and painted this, actually I had gone to this little village in France to paint the walled village around the castle, but this one little cottage really caught my attention because the colors and values seem to make a wonderful combination and then reflect into the water. To get started on today's program, though, first I want to give you a little insight into preparation for painting, into drawing, and one of the ways that I use to really focus my attention and get the whole thing started, and that's by using contour drawing. Let me show you how I start this. There's a number of ways in which to draw, and they're all good ways. And it doesn't hurt to have 2 or 3 different ways in which you can begin to approach a subject. And contour drawing, oddly enough, has a few little rules, and there are different variations on these rules. But one of the key things in a traditional contour drawing is to just look at the drawing. I mean, look at your subject and not look at your page. Later on, you can glance at it as I'm doing now. But let's just take a moment here and draw without looking at the page. You can see me here as I continue through here. And this requires so much concentration that it seems to take away your ability to chat or talk or to botch up your drawing. It's a wonderful way to begin to focus your attention as you do draw. The other thing that seems to be a nice rule to follow as you do a contour drawing is to keep one continuous line, and that's what I have going in this drawing. It's all one line. And if I were to give you a third rule, and I am afraid I have to break it, well, I won't break it. I'm just going to be quiet for a second. But my third rule would be to just shut up and draw. I might say now that after you've practiced this for a while, it's all right to take a little peek at what you've done. But don't stare at your page all the time. Just take a little peek, get your spot, go back in your drawing. And you can begin to see that this works. The idea of not looking at your paper and keeping a continuous line does a number of things besides really make you concentrate. It seems like the idea is so ridiculous that it quiets down your brain and lets you really concentrate and lets you really think, not letting anything get in your way. It seems like you can rely a little heavier on intuition. Now, for me to spend the entire time on this drawing isn't really fair because it may take me 25 minutes, a half an hour to block this out. It may take you a little bit longer if you haven't had this kind of practice doing it. But I have one that I've already prepared for you. And again, being able to quiet down and forget about what the balance is in the checkbook or what you're going to have for dinner or who you have to call next seems to be one of the important things to get ready to paint. And contour drawing not only helps you achieve your drawing, but it also lets you forget about everything else because you've really focused your attention on what you're going to start doing. I'm going to start here with with the whites on these buildings. And over again, you'll hear me say that white things are already painted for you. And that's probably one of the real keys to painting in watercolor, is to first identify what's going to be white, because that's the part that's left alone. That's the part you don't have to deal with. And so the subtle edges, as this goes back, begins to turn back into a little bit of shadow. And we decide which side is in light, which side is in shadow. If we look at the front edge of this chimney, we see that's light. You can see it in the painting. And then the left side, the left side that we see, is in shadow. You just lay it in there, and the form begins to turn. And to see this, and just to begin to quietly put that down, is really one of the simple ideas in painting. Same thing, this white building over here, I'm going to put a slightly dirty wash on it, or slightly neutralized wash, I might say. And by doing that, we begin to see the attention coming up over here in the facade of this house. Let me show you something. I've taken a piece of paper here, and we'll fold it up, and we can see a front edge in light, and then a side going back in shadow. It's the same concept, light, shadow, light. It forms this Z, forms this fold in the paper. And here we have a light wall, and then there's a little shadow from underneath this tree, and then there's a little parapet that comes out, and then it turns back again and folds back. It's the same concept, and it's one that is very easy to do. Put light on one side, shadow on the other, and you've turned a form. It's the same thing that's the basis of painting this boat. Light on the one side of the hull, shadow on the transom. Now we began to talk a little bit about color value. Obviously white has got to be your lightest value, but if we take the back wall, I mean this next building over, which is kind of a creamy yellow, it's the color of earth where they make the stones here, or the plaster for this building in France. This color, even though it's orange, is still a fairly light color, but it's darker than the white of the wall. As I come down here into some laundry, we leave the white of that alone. In this same earthy yellow, we can put all over the painting. We can put up here in these other roofs. Even though these roofs are going to be purple later on, we know that that purple is going to be darker than this yellow color of the stone. I might even take a nice big brush now. And first, I'll wet the sky with just pure water. And the sky won't be a lot darker than that pure water. I'll put a little bit of blue, just a tiny bit up in there. And the blue just into that wet. Kind of gives me that patchy sunlight that we had that day. And that'll all work fine. And I'll continue back across here with this flash of light. The roofs. And as the entire painting begins to get covered, we can see that the only things that are left white is this area in the center. So our attention is directed back here where the only true lights are left. And so some of these shadows that are right along down here. And some of the shadows of the boat tend to drop into there. And we might even put a little bit of green in the beginning to indicate some of these trees. Just drop them into there. Still early, we're still dealing with most of the lights and middle values. And again, if the green's up in here, drop it down into the water. And as we begin to approach some of those middle values, I'd like to take a second and show you how that special relationship between color and value, actually color is inherent, it's one of the, value is inherited, one of the properties of color. Let me show you how that works. Traditionally, we see color in a color wheel. That's usually the way we see it arranged, with yellows next to orange and orange next to red, red next to violet, blue, green, yellow. I mean, that's a set pattern. It has to go that way. There's no other way to make it go. I'm going to let this board go level so these things don't slide around here. But I've taken some chips of color, and instead of having them in a color wheel order like this, I'll take these same pure chips of color and we'll arrange them on a value scale. And we can see very clearly that the yellow does not belong up here next to black. It just doesn't go there. It doesn't even go in the middle values. It comes all the way up here as a light. Okay? Orange doesn't go next to black, but it doesn't go in the light values either. It tends to go more in the middle values. The light blue tends to stay in the middle value, maybe just a little bit darker than the orange. Dark blue can come up here near the darks, but not approaching black. The dark reds can go up next to black. Middle red tends to go in here. And the green, you can have a dark green or a light green. But we're beginning to see that certain colors tend to go to the dark end of the value scale, and other colors stay toward the light end. And if we just understand that these are inherent in color, we can make green by adding water to it. We can make that come all the way up to a light green, a very pale green, and almost white. So that has a fairly good range of color. But yellow doesn't go much beyond here. You can't get a darker yellow without going to brown. The same thing with orange. Orange seems to be a middle value, and it can get a little bit lighter, but it doesn't get very much darker. So anyway, bearing that in mind, let's see how we can use the pure values of these colors and their intensity to make this painting carry along a little bit further and really reach its full potential. Turn this back down again. Very often I use this tabletop ability to tilt to control a drip. Maybe we'll get a chance to try that here in just a second. One of the things I think I'll start with is these roofs that have that are already painted kind of a flesh color here, this earth color. They need to go into a purple. And that purple, because it's a mid-value, can go right over that yellow. Doesn't hurt anything. This is the transparency. This is the ability to layer paint with watercolor. That flesh color plus the purple really comes in there and begins to indicate the slate that I find very attractive in these villages. Same thing over here. Little different color of slate. It seems like every time they quarried it, it came out a little different. This one has a little bit more blue in it. But it still is a value that's darker than that orange, and it can overpower it. This poor house didn't quite get slated. It has more of a clay roof. I bet you a lot of people looked at it as a cheap roof. But that darker orange is still a mid-value. But it sure plays nicely against all that slate. That's why I said that this particular house seemed like it glowed. And in order to get that slate even darker, we might actually mix up a brown. Oh, there we go. So as we move into the darker values on that orange, it will no longer really be orange. It takes a step from orange to kind of a burnt red. You're really into a brown. It can't go beyond there and really stay orange. We believe it's orange. We get the feeling that it has some orange in it. But as it reaches the darker end of the values, it has to change a little bit there. Let me take a second here, clean the palette. And we'll go back to that wall. And we put down a first value before. Let's darken it a little bit, though, now. Come over here. Add a little bit of blue here, because we know that this side is dipping over to shadow just a little bit. So we drop down here. Get a little bit more of this shadow. And as we darken this wall over here, we begin to see that here again, our attention is framing in on this house. This dark here acts as almost as a little frame to not to so much treat your viewer as if they're stupid, but to say, I want you to look over here. This is the part that is very, very important. Paintings just don't happen. They have a lot, there's some thought that goes behind it. You're very much like a stage director that says, we're going to look in, we want the audience to look here, we want the audience to look there. And here again, if we see the color up there, we better see some more of that down in the water. There we go. Relax with it. That sheet, a little bit of a gray in the bottom of it. Same thing over here in this door. This door is a mid-value. It's a red. And that red, all of a sudden now, not only acts as a quasi-dark accent, but it's also a nice bright accent. Brings this painting a little bit more to life. Some of these pots over here and these oranges, paint them both together. Drop a little green around next to them. Drop that same green into the water. Watch how this thing's starting to drip there. That green just dripped into the pot. Let's turn this board upside down if we can for just a second. See if we can get it to roll back uphill. Whoops. It just went right across the top of the painting. There's nothing to worry about there. Just blot it back up. And you can see that that green that dripped into the pot is now back out of the pot. And that's one of the nice things about having a drawing board that you can tilt and adjust and do things with. And you let some of these things happen as happy accidents. That's part of the spontaneity of watercolor. And the watercolor does something on the page, you respond back to it. You're still in charge. You're still in control of it. But if you have absolute control over everything, then some of that spark leaves. I believe that you don't control everything. You predict certain things, and when it happens, kind of go with it. See where it takes you. Be ready for some of those spontaneous parts of life. Now, this painting is a little bit more finished, but I left some parts that begin to look finished. I left them half undone for you so we can carry you along here and let you see how these things happen. I put a green wash right over this, and I left a little light edge and then that shadow edge that we had before. And then all I have to do is come in here with a few dark strokes. And we get those window frames, those little cross members. I have the other ones already done for us. We'll do a few down here in this window. We can begin to just look at the painting and ask, where does it need a little bit of attention? Nice little warm accent for this chimney up here. Bang, bang. But the real star of this show has got to be back here around the front porch. Put a few more darks underneath this tree. A few darks in the pot. And when I was finished with this painting, I was actually surprised because I did it as a small, just as a delightful little sketch, as a little side idea. But they don't have to stay that way. Don't be afraid of letting a work that does more than what you expected to be carried into a larger work. And I wound up doing a very large piece and actually expanding the composition out horizontally and showing that whole castle, and showing against this whole castle this little village, this little cottage had plenty to say in too. Made it an interesting piece. Because it's not the fact that it's a cottage. As a matter of fact, a cottage can be a detriment. You could be caught up in the cute end of it instead of dealing with the fact that the bright colors against these neutrals, and also the range of value and the light shining through here. That's really what's important as a painting. And to combine both of them so the painting does double duty is a neat idea. There's a little gate back in here against a bush. Bushes behind it, and that dark bush makes the gate come out. Little dark accent there, a little bit of color, and these colors all drop down into the water. This tradition of painting little villages is nothing new. You could paint your own little village or even your own city, as Edward Hopper did in this painting Rooftops, which he did in 1926. It's from the Whitney Museum of American Art. And Hopper, being a disciple of Robert Henri, was almost trained to use the city as inspiration. Most people saw it as a thriving, bustling place with all kinds of interesting things going on, but Hopper, being more of an introvert, saw it as a quiet place. He went up on his roof and he painted the solitude of the city. So whatever one's direction and feeling is the most important thing, and Hopper shared that with us in this special little painting. One thing here, back in here, that the water does, besides reflect the color, it also tends to break up what's going on behind it. We have up in the village part here, up in the house and the little bit of the city behind it, we see the simple shapes. But down in the water, it's all broken up. It's broken into little hot passages that seem to shimmer and jump. And so this becomes a very busy part of the painting against a very quiet and more peaceful part up above it. And to be able to play one of these against the other is, again, a key to just interesting painting. Notice over here how I have a neutral gray here, and I'm just going to put a little shadow on the inside between, I think they call those the thwarts. All the landlubbers call them seats. And then a nice dark, rich dark, inside this window of the door. I'll mix it up with a little green and alizarin. And this does a double duty too. Not only does it make the door stand out a little bit more, but it's also making this little green plant stand out a little bit more. And this becomes a real focal point. And if we're going to call the attention into this area, then it doesn't hurt to come in here with a few extra bright accents right along here. Drop them right in here. There was some flowers that were blooming on this plant. I don't even remember what they were now. But more than anything else describing the flower, I really wanted to let them be bright red accents. Then a little bit of dark along here, and maybe a few cast shadows here. Now, one of the things that we used today was the white of the page, and we've talked about how color carries its own value and how these planes turn, and by simply molding these planes to turn one way to another, and then using some very complicated areas against simple areas. And of course, to focus our attention and shut out all the problems that carry you and make yourself think with contour drawing to really get started were the ideas that I wanted to discuss with you today. And I hope that that'll help you as you view art and as you try your own paintings. Thank you.
Next on Connecticut Public Television, it's Pierre Frenet. Stay tuned.
A book to accompany this series has been published by Watson Guptill Publications. Focus on Watercolor contains more than 100 color plates. The author, Timothy J. Clark, takes you through all the basics of watercolor and shows them in action in actual painting.